Welcome to Reformed Thinking. We are opening up a massive volume of work today, a true classic in the Library of Christian Literature. We're cracking open Charles Spurgeon's The Treasury of David.
It really is a monumental work.
Yeah.
I mean, Spurgeon didn't just write a commentary. He basically compiled a library. He pulls from the Puritan giants, the early church fathers, and, of course, his own deep well of theological insight to open up the Psalms.
And we aren't trying to tackle the whole book today. That would take a lifetime.
It would.
We're zooming in specifically on Psalm 60.
The Psalm 60 is a fascinating choice. It's a mixture of David, written at a moment of supreme crisis. If you just look at the title alone, it sets a scene that is absolutely terrifying for a national leader.
Right. The title is almost a chapter in itself. It says, "This was written when David was striving with Aram Naharaim and with Aram Zobah, and when Joab returned and smote 12,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt." That sounds like a lot of geography and a lot of fighting.
It's a war on two fronts, which is, the nightmare of any military commander. David is in the north, fighting the Syrian tribes. That's the Aram Naharaim and Aram Zobah reference.
Okay.
He's miles away from home with the main army. And while his back is turned, Edom, his old enemy from the south, sees an opportunity. They invade Judah.
So the king is away, the defenses are thin, and the old enemy kicks in the back door.
Precisely. And the kingdom isn't stable to begin with. You have to remember, David hasn't been king of all Israel for very long. The civil war between the house of Saul and the house of David has left the nation completely fractured. The walls are cracked. The people are frightened. It feels like the whole experiment of the kingdom of God is about to just collapse.
That sets up the context for the mission of our discussion today, then. We want to look at how a believer handles a moment like that, when it's not just a bad day, but a national and personal disaster.
Yes.
When it feels like God has actually cast you off.
And crucially, how you move from that feeling of total abandonment to the absolute confidence of victory. Because that's what Psalm 60 does. It starts with a trembling earth and ends with valiant action.
Let's start where Spurgeon starts then, which is with the title. It has this strange phrase in it, upon Shushanadith.
Yes. Translated, that means the lily of testimony.
The Lily of Testimony. That seems like a really odd name for a war song. I mean, when I think of battle hymns, I don't think of flowers.
No, you don't. And Spurgeon points out that contrast immediately. He notes that Psalm 45 was also set to the tune of the lilies, but that was a wedding song. It was about the king and his beauty.
Okay.
Here in Psalm 60, we have the king and the mud and blood of battle.
So why the lily? What's the connection?
Well, Spurgeon suggests a few things. First, he references a line from Macaulay's Song of the Huguenots. It goes, "Charge for the golden lilies now, upon them with the lance." So sometimes a flower is the symbol on the flag, the national ensign.
Ah, I see. A rallying symbol.
Exactly. But deeper than that, Spurgeon sees a connection to the testimony. The lily stands for something lovely and cheering in the law, specifically the promise of God.
So even in the middle of the war, the title calls attention to something beautiful.
It calls attention to the fact that the war is being fought for something beautiful. We're dividing the spoil and bearing testimony to the glory of God. It isn't violence for the sake of violence. It's the protection of God's lily, his truth.
The title also calls it a miktam. What's the definition there?
Miktam means a golden secret, or a psalm intended to teach. David isn't just venting his emotions here. He's obeying the precept to teach the children of Israel. He's recording this dark moment so that future generations can understand how God works.
Spurgeon has a great line about this. He says, golden secrets are to be told on the housetops.
That's right. And it's so counterintuitive to us, isn't it? We tend to want to hide our disasters or our difficult times. But a miktam says, no, this is a golden lesson. Victories and deliverances are not to be buried in silence. If God pulls you out of the fire, you don't hide the burn marks. You show them as proof of his might.
Okay, now, before we get into the verses themselves, we have to address this bit of a numbers problem.
Right.
The title here says, Joab smote 12,000 Edomites, but if you go to 1 Chronicles 18, it says Abishai smote 18,000. And then in 2 Samuel 8, it gives the credit to David for 18,000.
It's the kind of apparent discrepancy that skeptics love to jump on. But Spurgeon, and the Reformed tradition in general, has a very clear way of handling this. It comes down to the concept of headship and attribution.
Break that down for us. What does that mean?
Well, think about the hierarchy. David is the king.
Right.
He's the federal head of the nation.
Oh.
Abishai and Joab are his generals. In military history, we often say Napoleon won the Battle of Austerlitz. Did Napoleon personally kill every soldier? Of course not. But the victory is attributed to him as the head.
That makes perfect sense. So David gets the credit for the 18,000 because he's the king.
Correct. Now, regarding Joab and Abishai, they were brothers. They often worked in tandem. It's very likely that Abishai began the engagement and broke the enemy lines, accounting for the total of 18,000 casualties in the whole operation. Joab, arriving perhaps a bit later or commanding a specific division, was responsible for cutting down 12,000 specifically on the field of battle.
So the numbers aren't contradictory. They're just looking at different layers of the same conflict. One is the total, one is a specific part of it.
Precisely. And Spurgeon also notes that the 12,000 might refer to the bodies left on the battlefield, while the 18,000 includes those killed in the rout and flight. But the theological point is what really matters, that the glory flows upward. The generals fight, but the king gets the name. And in our theology, we fight our battles, but Christ our King gets all the glory.
The setting for the slaughter, though, is so grim. The Valley of Salt.
It's a harsh, harsh place. Spurgeon quotes the explorer Edward Robinson, who had visited the area. He describes it as the gore, south of the Dead Sea. It's a solid mass of rock salt furrowed by rain, with actual cliffs of salt.
Wow. Robinson talks about the ground being covered with debris and thistles.
It is a desolate, thirsty, stinging landscape. The very stones beneath your feet are salt. It's a place of intense heat and barrenness. I mean, can you imagine fighting a hand-to-hand battle in a literal salt mine under the desert sun? That's the reality behind this psalm.
So David is in this absolute pressure cooker. Let's look at the first verse. He doesn't start with, we can do this. He starts with, "O God, thou hast cast us off."
It is a brutal opening. The Hebrew word implies being treated as something foul or rancid, like a dead bough torn from a tree, or something offensive that you just want to get away from.
And he blames God directly. He says, "Thou hast scattered us. Thou hast been displeased."
And this is a core Reformed concept. David does not blame bad luck. He doesn't blame poor tactics or the weather or his intelligence reports. He traces the disaster directly to the first cause. He knows that if Israel is losing, it's because God is displeased.
That is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of modern listeners, I think. We like to think God only sends the good stuff, the blessings.
But that's not biblical thinking. David's politics are, at their root, the politics of piety. He knows that the Edomites are just the instrument. The real problem is that God has withdrawn his hand. If God is with us, the Edomites are nothing. If God has cast us off, then we are utterly helpless.
Spurgeon says, to be cast off by God is the worst calamity that can befall a man or a people.
But notice the nuance Spurgeon adds right after that. He says the worst form of it is when the person is not aware of it, when they're indifferent. The very fact that David is crying out, "O God, thou hast cast us off," proves that there's still a relationship. A truly cast-off soul doesn't pray. They don't care.
That's a huge comfort, actually. The pain of feeling abandoned is, in itself, a sign of spiritual life.
That is correct. It's the mourning and repentance that shows the casting off is only partial and temporary. A chastisement, not a final rejection.
In verse 2, David uses this really powerful earthquake metaphor. Thou hast made the earth to tremble. Thou hast broken it.
He's describing the state of the nation. Remember the civil war I mentioned earlier? The house of Saul against the house of David. The country was split right down the middle. The priests had been murdered by Saul. The army was demoralized by the Philistines. The civil authority was despicable.
So it wasn't a literal earthquake then. He's speaking figuratively.
It felt like one. The earth, the solid ground of their society, was cracking open. Spurgeon compares it to a house that is shaking so badly the walls are showing fissures ready to collapse.
And David prays, "Heal the breaches thereof, for it shaketh."
That is the prayer we all need, isn't it? When we see the church or the nation divided, cracking apart, we try to patch it with programs or politics or new initiatives. David knows that only the one who shook the earth can heal its breaches.
Then comes this phrase in verse 3 that I found really arresting. Thou hast made us to drink the wine of astonishment.
It's a very vivid image. The Hebrew concept is one of infatuation or bewilderment. It's the idea of reeling, staggering, not being able to walk a straight line.
Spurgeon calls it a potent potion.
He does. He uses a medical analogy. He calls God the great physician. And sometimes to cure a deep-seated chronic disease, the physician has to give a medicine that makes the patient stagger. It's a purgative. It makes you sick to make you well.
The wine of astonishment, it's like they're drunk on tragedy.
I think that's a great way to put it. Spurgeon says, when grief becomes so habitual as to be our drink and to take the place of our joys, then are we in an evil case indeed. It's that state where you're so overwhelmed by a stream of bad news that you're just dizzy with it. You can't think straight.
But then, right in the middle of this drunkenness and shaking, we hit verse 4, and the tone just changes completely.
This is the pivot point of the entire psalm.
Yeah.
Thou hast given a banner to them that fear thee.
A banner, like a flag.
Yes, an ensign, a standard. Think about what a banner means on a chaotic battlefield. It's a rallying point. If you're scattered and confused, you look for the banner. It tells you where your commander is. It tells you who you are.
And Spurgeon makes a great point here. He says God would not give them a banner if he meant to destroy them.
That is the logic of faith. It's beautiful. You don't issue a regiment a flag just before you send them to be massacred. The banner is a proof of commission. It's a guarantee that there is a battle to be fought and a victory to be won.
He connects it to the truth. The verse says that it may be displayed because of the truth.
Spurgeon immediately quotes the Latin motto, Magna est veritas et prevalebit. Great is truth, and it will prevail. The banner is not just a piece of cloth. It is the gospel. It is the truth of God.
And he says it is to be displayed.
Yes. Banners are for the breeze. They're not for the closet. Spurgeon is very, very insistent on this point. To be ashamed of the banner, to hide it, is a deadly sin. Israel might have been trembling, but they were commanded to lift up the standard.
So even when things are going wrong, even when we feel cast off, we still have this banner of truth.
That's our only hope. We don't rally around our feelings, which are like the shifting sand. We rally around the truth, which is the unshakable rock.
Verse 5 brings in another heavy theological word, beloved, that thy beloved may be delivered.
This touches on the doctrine of election. David refers to the people as God's beloved. Spurgeon notes that God saves the nation not for the sake of the whole mass, but for the sake of the elect remnant, the inner seed.
And the prayer is so urgent. It says, save with thy right hand and hear me.
There's a real desperation there. Spurgeon points out the order. Save first and hear afterwards. It's like a drowning man crying out. He doesn't want a conversation. He wants a hand to pull him out of the water.
And David sees himself as interceding for these beloved ones.
Just as Christ intercedes for us. David is a type of Christ here. He is pleading for the deliverance of his people. And he appeals to God's right hand. That is the symbol of strength and dexterity. He's saying, I need a miracle and I need it now.
So we've had the complaint and we've had the rallying cry of the banner. And now in verse 6, God speaks.
This is the anchor of the whole psalm. God hath spoken in his holiness.
What does that mean exactly? Why in his holiness?
Because God's holiness is the absolute guarantee of his word. He cannot lie. It is against his nature. If he speaks, it is as good as done. Spurgeon says David stops looking at the disaster, at the broken walls, the invading Edomites, and he plugs his ears to the noise of the battle and listens to the promise of God.
And what follows is this geography lesson. But it's not just a map, it's a claim. David starts listing places. I will divide Shechem and mete out the valley of Succoth.
This is what you could call the internal map. These are places inside Israel. Shechem and Succoth were areas that had been contested or shaky during the civil war with Saul's house, with Ishbosheth. Right. By listing them, David is saying, mine. It is a declaration of ownership.
He's claiming his inheritance by faith.
By faith. That's the key. He hasn't fully secured everything yet, but because God has spoken, he treats it as already done. He says, I will divide, which is the act of a victor distributing conquered land.
Then he gets metaphorical with the tribes. Gilead is mine, and Manasseh is mine. Ephraim also is the strength of mine head.
Ephraim was a massive warlike tribe. Spurgeon calls it the helmet, the strength of my head. David is looking at the military might that has now unified under his rule, and he's thanking God for it.
And Judah is my lawgiver.
That goes straight back to the prophecy in Genesis 49. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. It is the seat of civil power, of royal authority. So David is looking at his own kingdom, the military might from Ephraim, and the civil authority from Judah, and saying, God has given this to me. It is united. It is whole.
But then he looks outside the borders, and this is where the language gets colorful. He starts mocking his enemies.
It's the confidence of faith turning into a holy contempt for the enemy. He looks at Moab, Edom, and Philistia, the three nations that were causing all this trouble.
First, Moab. He says, Moab is my washpot.
It is a shocking image. In the ancient world, a washpot or a basin was a vessel of complete dishonor. It was what you used to wash the dirt and filth off your feet after a long journey.
So he's reducing an entire nation to a foot bath.
That is correct. Moab was once this dangerous, proud enemy. Now, David says they are just a pot for my slops. Spurgeon has a wonderful note on this. He says, "Faith finds a washpot even in filthy Moab."
What does he mean by that?
He means that even the wicked, in the end, will only function to cleanse and purify the church. They're reduced to servitude. Their opposition ultimately serves God's purposes for his people.
Then he turns to Edom. Over Edom will I cast out my shoe.
There are two layers to this image. First, it's a gesture of raw contempt. It's like throwing your slipper at a slave.
Which is still a huge insult in many cultures today.
Very much so. But secondly, and maybe more to the point, it is a legal symbol. In the book of Ruth or Deuteronomy, removing the shoe symbolized the transfer of property or the giving up of a right. By casting his shoe over Edom, David is claiming it as property. He's saying, this land is mine, these people are my slaves.
So Edom, the very nation that invaded him, becomes his personal possession.
Yes. The text implies a total effortless subjugation. He doesn't even need a sword for Edom anymore. He just throws his shoe at them. The fight is over in his mind.
And finally, Philistia. Philistia, triumph thou because of me. That sounds sarcastic.
It is biting irony. Some translations render it as a taunt like, go ahead, shout your war cry now, see what happens. Or it could mean, you will be forced to join my triumphal procession.
No.
You will shout, but it will be because you are walking in chains behind my chariot as a conquered foe.
It's a complete reversal. He went from thou hast cast us off to Moab is my washpot.
And the pivot point was one sentence. God hath spoken. Once the believer truly grasps the promise of God, the enemy shrinks. The terrifying Moabites become a basin for dirty water.
But there's still a practical problem to solve. Edom has a stronghold. Verse 9 asks, who will bring me into the strong city? Who will lead me into Edom?
He is talking about Petra, the city of rock.
I've seen pictures of Petra, the incredible buildings carved right into the red cliffs.
It is a fortress protected by nature itself. It's accessible only by a long, narrow gorge called the Sick. From a military standpoint, it is, for all intents and purposes, impregnable. You can hold off an entire army with just a handful of men.
So David has defeated them in the open battle in the Valley of Salt, but now the remnants of their army have retreated up into the rocks.
And this brings David back to reality. Joab and Abishai won in the valley, in the open field. But who can take the rock? Human generalship cannot do it. Human bravery cannot do it.
So he asks, who will lead me?
And the answer in verse 10 is, wilt not thou, O God?
The same God who had cast them off at the beginning of the psalm.
This is the maturity of faith. David realizes that the hand that struck him is the only hand that can save him. He doesn't go looking for a new God. He doesn't go looking for a political alliance with Egypt. He goes back to the very God who disciplined him.
And he says in verse 11, give us help from trouble, for vain is the help of man.
Vain is the help of man.
Yeah.
Israel had learned this lesson the hard way, hadn't they? They chose Saul because he looked like a king. He was tall, strong, a man's man, and he failed them miserably.
And even Joab and Abishai, as effective as they are just men.
They're just instruments. Spurgeon quotes a beautiful line here. He says, a man is stronger standing on the rock of Zion alone than with a multitude of human props. We so often look for our human props, the right experts, the right politicians, the right financial advisors. David strips all of that away. Against the city of rock, you need the rock of ages. Nothing else will do.
This leads us to the final verse, verse 12. Through God we shall do valiantly, for he it is that shall tread down our enemies.
This is the summary statement of the Christian life, and you have to look at the perfect balance in it.
Through God we shall do valiantly.
Notice it does not say, God will do it so we can sleep. It says, we shall do valiantly. There is action, there is fighting, there is human effort and courage.
But it's through God.
Correct. The power source is divine. The activity is human. We fight, but we fight with his strength, not our own.
And then the second half, for he it is that shall tread down our enemies.
This is the ultimate agency. The foot that steps on the neck of the enemy is the foot of the believer, but the weight that crushes them is the weight of God.
That's a fascinating and important distinction.
Spurgeon puts it this way. Divine operation is the supreme motivation for human activity. We don't fight to get God to work. We fight because God is at work. Because we know he is treading them down, we can do valiantly.
It takes us right back to that banner, doesn't it? We carry the flag, we march into the battle, but the victory is guaranteed by the one who gave us the flag in the first place.
And that changes everything about how you fight. If you think the outcome depends entirely on your sword arm, you'll be paralyzed by fear when you see a fortress like Petra. But if you know that God is the one trading down the enemy, you can charge the gates with confidence.
So we have traveled such a long way in just 12 short verses. We started with a broken earth and a people who felt cast off. We ended with valiant soldiers treading down their enemies.
And the bridge between those two realities is the holiness of God and the faith of his people, which lays hold of his promises.
It's a remarkable progression, from the trembling earth to the valiant action.
It is the pattern of the Christian life, really. We are often shaken, we often feel the whine of astonishment, but we possess the banner of truth. And because of that, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us.
Spurgeon had that provocative thought about the banner, though. He was so insistent that it is given to be displayed.
Yes. And I think that's a question we have to leave with you, our listener, today.
If you are holding the banner.
If you possess the truth, if you have the gospel, but you are hiding it because you're going through hard times, if you've folded up the flag because the earth is trembling in your life, are you actually delaying your own victory?
The banner is meant for the wind, not the closet.
Precisely. Even in the Valley of Salt, especially in the Valley of Salt, that is when you unfurl it.
That's a challenging thought to end on. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Spurgeon's Treasury of David. It's a rich mine of gold, and we've barely scratched the surface, but we hope this look at Psalm 60 has been an encouragement to you.
Keep the banner flying.
We will see you next time on Reformed Thinking.